Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. We turn our attention now to the fifth commandment in our ongoing series, the sin stones. And this will be our first look at this command. And we should rightly begin by actually reading the text where we read these words: "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." It's been my habit over the years to teach a series of lessons on a biblical view of the family. Those lessons are in my book, Bound for Glory, and my teaching series, Bound for Glory. I've also done it for the saints in India. And when I do this talk, I typically do with these talks, I start with a talk on a biblical understanding of the whole of the family, looking at the dominion mandate and why Eve was made to be a helper suitable for Adam. I then look at the call that God places on the husband toward the wife, the call God places on the wife toward the husband. And then and by the way, that's not an easy thing to do. And so when I get to the call of children, the responsibility of children, I rejoice that it's so profoundly simple. And typically I'm working through, at this point, Ephesians chapter 5, end of chapter 5, beginning of chapter 6. Husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church. Wives, submit to your own husbands as unto the Lord. And then we get to the children. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Any questions? How simple, how straightforward, how easy. But it's not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because of our parents and their parents and their parents and their parents, all the way back to our first parents. Children struggle with the call to honor their father and their mother, because like their father and their mother, they're sinners. That's the reality. But I want to suggest that there's more to this text than that. We're going to talk about this probably next time. We're going to unpack, sort of as Jesus did with respect to the command against murder and the command against adultery. We're going to unpack a little bit more broad, more full understanding of what all is enjoined in this text. But I want to start today in this particular segment by pointing out the promise here. The promise here it's not just, as again, remembering that all the 10 commandments are invitations to joy. But here we're told, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. What is God saying here? Now, some of you may remember me having spoken in the past about the diabolical art of simultaneous translation. This is what happens when we're reading our Bibles and our eyes actually see the words that are in the Bible. And in the quiet of our own minds, we may actually say the words that are in the Bible. But what we actually hear as we're going through, because this is what the devil's whispering in our ears, is something less than what the Bible's saying. It doesn't have to be a contradiction. It doesn't have to be a rabbit trail. It can just be a diminishing of what's been said. For instance, we take this text, honor your father and your mother, that may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And what we turn it into is obey your parents because it's a good thing to do. Well, we are supposed to obey our parents. This does teach us to obey our parents, and it is a good thing to do. But that's not all it says. It also says that as we honor our father and mother, our days will be long in the land that the Lord is giving us, that it will prosper us, it will bless us. Friends, think about our worldly perspective about what brings blessing. If you're a parent, you love your children, and you want it to go well for them in the land. But if you're like most of us, you have bought into the devil's lie that the pathway to it going well for them in the land is that we get them a good education. We get them a skill that's in high demand so that they can make a good living, so that they can live in a good neighborhood, so that our grandchildren can go to good schools and get a good education, so that they can get a good job, so that they can live in a nice neighborhood, and so that they can make a lot of money. On and on and on and on and on. But what actually is contained in this command, friends, is the secret to having a good life. Now, I will grant you that there's a proverbial element to this secret. What do I mean by that? Well, when we make a proverbial promise, we're not trying to treat it like math. When we say, he who hesitates is lost, we're not saying that every single person who hesitates for a moment will lose whatever it is that they're going to lose. In fact, we would argue that there's a balancing principle. Look before you leap. But in general, if you hesitate too long, bad things will happen. In general, if you don't look before you leap, bad things will happen. In general, if you honor your parents, it'll go well with you in the land. If you want to know the safest bet, the right direction to go, it's right here. God tells it to us. He shares it with us. And our calling as parents is not to bless our children with the tools that the devil says they'll need to have a good life, but with the tools that God says they'll need. When I discipline our sons, it's not at all uncommon for me to say to them, "Why does Dad discipline you?" And they'll say, "To help me learn to obey." So that's right. And why does Dad want you to learn to obey? So that it'll go well with me. That's right. Dad isn't doing this because he's angry at you. Dad isn't doing this because he doesn't like you. Dad's doing this because he wants to see you blessed. Which is precisely what God's saying here. It's not complicated. It's right there in front of us. It's like a big neon sign. It's a message from God. You want to know how to have a good life? Honor your father and your mother. Now, we will not only break down the broader implications of what this means in a future segment. Again, I'm unsure at this point about whether we'll do one more or two more, but we will also look at the limitations of this principle. We will look at what does honor look like for grown adults. We're going to slowly take our time working through this because this is so important. My desire for me is that God would bless me. My desire for my children is that God would bless them. And my desire for you is that you would bless your parents, that your children would bless you. And it all starts with honoring them. I hope you'll be with us next week when we begin to unpack what that looks like. It's time once again for a curating your movie library segment. And sadly, on this particular segment, I will be without my life partner, my best friend, my joy, and my movie-going co-critic, Lisa. She will be back soon, God willing. But we have been watching of late a few fewer movies and a few more series. And it's true, we've covered series from time to time. But right now, there's not so many things that we're zealous to make sure everybody else gets a chance to see that we haven't covered already. So I'm going to do another top 5, and I'm going to do one that might surprise you. This segment is going to be on the top 5 Westerns ever made. Again, in my judgment. I'm not suggesting that this is an objective list like when I say the greatest movie ever made was Braveheart. That's objectively true, not just my opinion. This time it's just my opinion on top 5 Westerns. But before I get to the list, I want to remind us about something strange about Westerns, that Westerns survive, but barely. Time was when Westerns were profoundly common. They were going on all the time, and not just, serials like Tom Mix or things like that. I'm talking about A movies, not B movies. Lots and lots of Westerns in the past, and none now. It's not that it's disappeared, it's just that it's gotten very, very rare. Well, some of the things on my list here are older, some of them are newer. All of them you should be able to find one way or another. Before I get to the top 5, though, I'd like to give a couple on my honorable mention list. And these two show up here for 2 reasons. One, because they're not quite as good as the other 5, which is a reasonable assumption. But also because they have a relatively high comedy element to them. And so the Western part is almost coincidental. And those 2 movies that I'd like to list are Shanghai Noon, which is a Jackie Chan vehicle, but also includes Owen Wilson, who is just, I think, a really, really funny guy. And I remember seeing it when that came out and really enjoying that. And then the second one is an older classic comedy with a Western theme, and that's Blazing Saddles. And probably nothing more needs to be said about that. So let's turn our attention to the top 5 Western movies according to yours truly. Number 5 is a Western made from the 1970s. It's called The Shootist, and it stars Ron Howard, Opie, and Richie. It stars Jimmy Stewart, and it stars John Wayne. In fact, this was his last movie role. And it feels like it. The Shootist is to Westerns what Balboa is, or Rocky Balboa is to the boxing movies. It is a forlorn, sad, age has come kind of picture, looking at John Wayne, his last starring role. But it's really good. Let me encourage you to see that. Oh, I just thought of another somewhat comedic honorable mention. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to watch it. 2 of them, actually. One, The Cheyenne Social Club, which is a vehicle for Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart, and A Big Hand for the Little Lady, which is, again, got some comedy to it as well. Sort of a heist kind of movie. Number 4 on the top 5 Westerns of all time. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. My stars. What an outstanding movie. What an outstanding pairing of these 2 men. And this also was made in the 1970s. And, of course, if you haven't seen it, you gotta see it. I mean, this is the kind of classic movie. This is the kind of movie that even if you've never seen it, if you don't feel like it's a classic, just watching it and you'll think, yeah, that was a good movie. It meets the, it meets the Man in the Iron Mask standard. It's a good movie. It's fun. It's entertaining. The ending is a little sad, a little existential, but check it out nevertheless. Number 3, True Grit. Now, this may sound like sacrilege to some of you, but I'm going to let you choose which one. I already have John Wayne in our list, and would argue, by the way, that the greatest John Wayne movie is not actually a Western, and it's not The Green Beret. I love the John Wayne movie where he is a retired boxer from Pittsburgh who goes to Ireland and finds a wife. That's a great movie. But True Grit is a great movie with John Wayne, but it's also a great movie in the recent remake with Jeff Bridges. Boy, did he do a good job. I mean, talk about having tough shoes to fill. I would say that comparing John Wayne and True Grit to Jeff Bridges in True Grit is a closer more surprising, shocking, hey, he really nailed it thing than comparing Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger as the Joker in the Batman movies. Number 2. You didn't think we were going to leave out Clint Eastwood, did you? The Unforgiven, relatively recent. It came out during my adult life. It's one of those movies that just sort of keeps the genre going when you think it's long gone. It comes back, and this is not only Clint Eastwood is he in it, but he's also the director of it, and it's really, really good. Also, like The Shootist, there's an element of dealing with age and growing older. Finally, the number 1 Western movie is also one of the top 5 movies ever made, the only of the Westerns to make it in the top 5 movies ever made, and that is, of course, Tombstone. I don't need, again, I've done it in the past, I don't need to speak the praises of Tombstone. It's something else. In fact, friends, if you don't even like Westerns, if you think, tiresome, predictable, whatever, check out Tombstone. You will enjoy, and talk about an all-star cast. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Neill. I mean, not Sam Neill. Sam the Cowboy. Sam Neill's the one from Jurassic Park. That's Sam the Cowboy, who's just like the cowboy, is in it. And Billy Bob Thornton has a small role in it. Charlton Heston has a small role. I mean, golly, Neds, how can you not watch a Western with Charlton Heston in it? And, of course, the performance of Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday is perhaps the greatest performance by any actor in any role ever. So check it out. That's my top 5 Western movies ever. If you want to make a complaint, if you want to make a counter argument, if you want to say thank you, RC, for recommending this movie, I really enjoyed it, let us know. We always appreciate that kind of feedback. Have you ever wondered why hypocrisy is so rampant? Well, the answer is because the world is full of hypocrites. Now, before you shake your head in disgust at those terrible hypocrites, let me channel my inner Paul Washer and remind you, I'm talking about you and me. We are all eager to present ourselves as better than we are. And so we project an image that is flattering and inaccurate. Such may be the actual engine that drives the raging success of various social media platforms. We all get to put our best foot forward, using the best moments of our lives to construct an illusion. Social media, however, has another part to play in our hypocrisy follies. Social media discourages thoughtful discourse. We don't so much think as feel. And our feelings are driven by our echo chambers and our memes rather than careful, deliberate, and rational thought. Consider the strange bedfellows of politics. First, how can we miss the hypocrisy of Republicans, who 25 years ago vehemently insisted the president's private life disqualified him from office, and then, when it was their guy, vehemently insisted that the president's private life is of no significance? Well, that's the obvious part. But wait. There's more. While the left delights to poke fun at Republican hypocrisy on the matter, such shows that they too are hoisted on their own petard. That is, they insisted that President Clinton's private life was of no consequence, and now insist that President Trump's private life is of great consequence. But wait, there's more. When the right delights to poke fun of the left for being hoisted on their own petard, for insisting first that President Clinton's private life didn't matter, and now insisting President Trump's does, the right is then hoisted on its own petard since they insisted the opposite when it was President Clinton. To put it more succinctly, we are utterly indifferent to logical consistency, but deeply committed to fussing at our enemies while ignoring the beams in our own eyes. All of which reduces down to the hard fact that in our sin, we all like to think of ourselves as better than we really are, and are more than happy to prop that folly up by insisting that our enemies are worse than they are. We have one standard for ourselves and another for everyone else. See jet-setting, size 16 carbon shoe-wearing climate change heroes, or limousine liberals who laugh all the way to the bank, trying to shame those who have prospered. What do we do about it? Well, we confess rather than cover our sins. We confess our rather than their sins. We confess not our mistakes, but our sins. We own that we are worse than others can see. We judge ourselves by the same standard by which we judge others. We remember and rejoice that our standing is not based on how we compare with others, but rather on how He identifies with us. We, inside the church, we have nothing to hide, for we have nothing to boast of. And we know well, we know for certain that all will be revealed. Let's put down the masks and lift up the cross. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.